my final point, ladies and gentlemen, is on our duty. Everybody in this room should go away remembering these words at the bottom of page 20. We have a duty to not only be vigilant, but to persuade our Turkish Cypriot cousins that the rule of law is the key to a settlement. We need to persuade the politicians that the rule of law is the key, and we need to make them understand what the rule of law is, because most politicians don't understand it. I'm going to quote to you here United States Supreme Court Associate Justice Anthony Kennedy, who was appointed to the United States Supreme Court by President Kennedy back in the late 1980s. This is what Justice Kennedy said at a graduation ceremony at Stanford University last year. Freedom is the birthright of all. Not some, but all, including the refugees. When we, and this is very especially important on us in the diaspora, who've been the beneficiaries of an excellent education and the best that the British legal system can offer, this is particularly applicable to us. We, and everybody in this room, when we help others find freedom, we save our own. If freedom is demolished in Cyprus, it's demolished here in London, because it sets a precedent that can be abused. So freedom goes hand in hand with law, as ethics does. We must be willing to persuade others to make law and freedom central to their own lives and their own nation. Turkey, we need to persuade Turkey, difficult though it is. And you must be prepared to take some risks to make the case. You may enter a realm of ideas or a place where freedom is not just in doubt but opposed. And we heard earlier from the Turkish professor that freedom and the values of the European Union are opposed in Ankara. But you must find inventive new ways to make the case for freedom. I notice the camera in front of me. You cannot preserve what you do not revere. You cannot protect what you have not learned. You cannot defend what you do not know. How many of you have read the Lisbon Treaty? Hands up. Well, there's a couple of us. It says in the Lisbon Treaty, at Article 21 of the EU Charter that's been brought into the force by the Lisbon Treaty, any discrimination based on any ground, such as sex, race, colour, ethnic or social origin, genetic features, language, religion or belief, political or any other opinion, membership of a national minority, property, birth, disability, age or sexual orientation shall be prohibited. So we can't discriminate against Kyriakides because he's from Agios Ambrosios. What did Justice Kennedy say? You cannot preserve what you do not revere. You cannot protect what you have not learned. You cannot defend what you do not know. If we are conscious of the heritage that defines us, we are empowered in a special way. And our heritage in the Western liberal tradition goes back to ancient Athens and Aristotle and his great book Ethics, which I would encourage everybody to read. If we do that, we come to this inevitable conclusion. Law and freedom become even more priceless when we give them to others. That is why law and freedom are an ultimate expression of the human spirit. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Davos. As always, not only the content, but a stunning performance as well. Questions? I would like the questions to be very brief and succinct, and also the answers if possible, so we can get as many as we can. I'll start with the gentleman in front.
Θα συνεχίσω τη συζήτηση που είχαμε με τον Κυριάκο προηγουμένως, ο οποίος είπε ότι... I forgot, I say it in English. But I started discussion from the point Kyriakos left it, by saying that Turkey goes up and up, and therefore, if now is not the time for a settlement, when is going to be? Well, I happen to think that This is not the right time, and I will explain briefly why. It is not only that Turkey is going up and up, though to the extent that is true, and I will say that view with some reservations because there are uncertainties in the way, I would also say that this is enough reason for saying that this is not the time for a settlement. We cannot, all right, Kyriakos Christodoulou said that all of us should declare that Turkey should respect the law and the human rights. But where the Greek leadership has failed abysmally is that they have not taken up the rights. They have not taken up this argument. There has not been official reaction, systematic reaction to the colonization of Cyprus. Everyone says that this is illegal, this is a crime, but then there have been opportunities for us, for the Greek side, to take up the issue. They have failed. Now, what one can say, we suffer from a vacuum of leadership. I mean, an example of the vacuum of leadership and the contradictions we suffer from is that this famous slogan, solution by the Cypriots for the Cypriots, is an example of the sport into which the Greek leadership has been engaging, the self-trapping process. We cannot understand that the Cyprus issue has not been created by the Cypriots and therefore it cannot be solved by the Cypriots. We see the Cypriots, where the settlers come into picture. Has one ever questioned, what do we consider the settlers? Are they Cypriots?
I value all your comments, but there will be many people who want to make some questions.
Yes.
If you could,
well, I say...
get direct to the point and ask a question, I would appreciate it.
Well, the question is when we say solution for the Cypriots by the Cypriots, what do we consider the settlers? Because if we consider the settlers Cypriots, then we don't deserve anything better. If we consider the settlers not Cypriots, the first thing we should have said is that it should not be participation of the settlers into any referendum concerning the future of the Cypriots. Okay.
Yes, I think that's a key point. I think that skated over this issue. The relevant provision is Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention of 1949, relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war. This Geneva Convention provides that, quote, the occupying power of any territory shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. And in a judgment of the International Court of Justice a couple of years ago, 6 years ago rather, in the context of the Palestinians, the International Court clarified that the Geneva Convention prohibits not only deportation or forced transfers of population, such as those carried out during the Second World War, but also any measures taken by an occupying power in order to organise or encourage transfers of parts of its own population into the occupied territory. So the answer to your question, sir, is that the settlers in Cyprus, if they are settlers, are there in violation of the Geneva Conventions. They are there, in other words, as a consequence of a war crime. And it is absolutely essential that the definition of a citizen of the Republic is defined as a prelude to addressing the question of the settlers. Remember what Lord Philip said, the rule of law is never negotiable. So I don't understand why we're negotiating over numbers in relation to a matter of principle. The principle is the settlers are there in violation of the Geneva Conventions. They are there as a consequence of a war crime. The question should be, how are they deported in accordance with due process, in accordance with the rule of law, and subject to the unwritten rules of ethics? That should be the key question. The politicians, regrettably, are ducking it because it's too difficult, they think.